Ultra learning. Ultra learning. Right, look at this man. Look at Scott. He's looking pretty smug, isn't he? Well, he's got a good reason to feel a bit smug. It's a good book. He's done a really good job. Now, ultra learning, what do you think it might be? Here's Scott's definition. Scott says it's a strategy for acquiring skills and knowledge that's self-directed and intense. Self-directed and intense. He's not kidding when he says it's intense. This is not for the faint-hearted. And it's an approach that enables people to learn an awful lot in a very short amount of time. When I say an awful lot, what am I talking about? I've got some examples here. We've got one guy who's worked out how to learn any language to fluency, mind you, any language to fluency in 3 months. 3 months. He's up to his 13th language at the time of writing. He just collects them. He's worked out how. Then we've got a guy who had never done any public speaking and didn't like it. Okay? No good at it. And he set himself the challenge. Okay, I'm going to see how far I can get. And he applied Scott's 9 principles. There's 9. We're going to be going through them. He applied them. And guess what? He won the Toastmasters World Championships in 7 months. After just 7 months of training using the 9 principles intensely, he actually won the competition for the entire planet. Extraordinary. Or one more guy, and it's another example of an ultra learner, a guy called Nigel Richards. Now, if any of you out there play Scrabble, do you have any Scrabble players? You may know the name Nigel Richards. He's something of a god in the domain of Scrabble, in the Scrabble universe, you might say. He's won the regular Scrabble competition multiple times, but he set himself a challenge. He thought he'd set himself a challenge, an ultra learning challenge. He wanted to see how far could he go in the French Scrabble World Championships. Well, get this, he won after 9 weeks of studying a French dictionary. 9 weeks. He was able to master it sufficiently to win the World Scrabble Championships. My goodness. So Scott's found 9 principles that he sees ultra learners using consistently. Use them in different ways, but there are 9 factors which are key. When we, this is me and you, when we can apply more of these 9, we can dial up our ability to learn faster. Now, why might it be important, do you think, to learn quickly nowadays more than ever? Well, it's no surprise to you that the world is changing faster than ever in all domains. It's not just career, it's not just technology, it's also health, it's economics, geopolitical powers. Everything is changing and faster than ever. The futurist Alvin Toffler put it this way. He said, the illiterate of the 21st century won't be those who can't read and write. There'll be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. The illiterate of the 21st century, those who are unable to be adaptable and to learn quickly and flexibly. So the things that I'm going to share today, I'm going to share these 9, let's get them right, 9 principles. You don't have to use them in an ultra learning project. You don't need to master a language in 3 months, but you're doing learning anyway, right? Learning's just part of whatever you do already. So you're already learning. You could just apply these principles to learning what you're already learning faster, to be more effective. But what Scott does say is, if you can really master these techniques, it will transform your sense of self, your sense of what you are capable of. It will expand your sense of self. So, in the chat, if you could significantly improve your ability to learn effectively, learn significantly more faster, what might you apply it to? What might be a learning target for you? what might be a learning project? You don't need to aim to be the world champion at anything, but I'd like to know if you do have that aspiration. In the chat box, please, let me know, what might you aspire to learning more effectively? It could be something like even being the best parent you can be, or maybe being the best coach. Languages, and you fancy languages. Which languages, Anne? Let me know. I'm curious. Maybe one at a time, though, hey? Pick one. Where will you start? Island, you'd like to do an axle jump. That's why you're here. Oh, that's right, an axle jump. An axle jump, you've told me about this before. This is one of those these skating maneuvers, isn't it? Ice skating maneuver. Fantastic. Michelle, you'd like to do your international research project on adult learning. How interesting. This is about learning. This is going to be extremely relevant, isn't it? What else have we got? Karen, you'd like to learn a musical instrument. But which one? Which one would you most like to learn if you could? Because you get to choose. You get to pick. I can't play any musical instruments, but yes, it would be a good thing. Tim, you fancy mastering some drumming techniques? Well, you can. In fact, Tim, after you've done it, I want you to get in touch and give me a demo. Okay, let's move on to the first of the principles, the first of the 9 principles. It's a bit of a mouthful, but Scott calls it meta learning. Now, what he's really talking about here is planning up front. Really good learners, ultra learners, spend a lot of time up front planning how they're going to learn. The rest of us might just jump in, find an appealing course or an appealing app on a topic and just leap in because we want to get started. Ultra learners hold their horses, and Scott says they'll actually spend up to 10% of the total project time doing the planning up front. They're getting really clear on the why, the what, and the how before they get learning. The why is absolutely critical. If you are going to learn intensely, you'd better have a compelling why. And there are 2 kinds of why you need to have. One is the outcome why. Let's say the destination. Why are you going to that destination of being able to master that drumming technique, to speak that language, to get that doctorate, to do that ice skating maneuver? Is it like that, Ivan? Is there you'll have to demonstrate it to me sometime once you've got it right. You need a compelling why, though. The outcome. Does it matter sufficiently? What's really important about that? So all ultra learners have got a really clear why that's going to sustain them throughout the hard work, because this isn't some easy, quick learning technique. This is an approach that's hard, it's painful, but it's effective. So you need to know the why for the destination, but also you need to have a why for the journey. How are you going to enjoy yourselves? And enjoyment takes on many different dimensions, but how can it become worthwhile? The most successful ultra learners are really interested in what they're doing. They may not actually enjoy the learning very much directly, but they're fueled by an interest to keep going. They want to know. They're curious. And it's that fuels them along the journey. So ultra learners have a compelling why. They've also got a compelling what they're going to learn and how they're going to learn. Ultra learners speak to the experts, people who have already gone there and have already done that. When the rest of us might say, oh, I'm too embarrassed to speak to an expert in the field. I think I know what I ought to learn. Scott says, no, we must check with people who already know the field. A lot of people have wasted, I know some of them, I may be one of them, have wasted many years getting qualifications that actually at the end of the day, they didn't need for the career they wanted. There was a time in the past where you had to be qualified. There had to be a publicly a recognized certification to do things. Life's changed hugely. Yes, there are still professions, medicine, law, where you absolutely have to have a certain certification. But for an awful lot of careers, no, maybe not. You need skills, but there are different ways of gathering those skills. So meta learning, up to 10% of the project time up front. So that's number one. Number two, the second principle, is focus. Now, I wonder how many of you have come across the book by Cal Newport called Deep Focus. Cal advocates if there's something cognitively demanding work you need to do, there's only one way to do it effectively, and that's to do one thing at a time. It's to unitask, not to multitask, but to unitask, to completely immerse yourself in this one topic for at least periods of up to 1 hour, at least up to 1 hour. So in that hour, you are not checking your email. You are not having a bit of a fun research on Google, explore different ideas. You are staying with the topic at hand, doing the hard work. So we're learning something here. You've got to build up momentum and stay on the one thing. Ultra learners are very good at engaging in deep work. They do one thing at a time, immerse themselves in. Now, this isn't to say that their attention doesn't drift. It does, but they're good at bringing their attention back. They recognize sooner than the rest of us when their attention has wandered, and they're good at bringing it back. Ultra learners are also very good at beginning periods of focus. They will schedule time in their calendars, they block out time, and they will show up at that time. They will honor the time that they've blocked out. In that time, they do one thing. Scott says if you've got a couple of different topics that you need to learn, you've got 3 hours, say a 3-hour block to learn them in, don't spend 1 hour, don't spend the 3 hours on one topic. Instead, if you've got 3 topics, chop it up. Spend just an hour on one topic, then an hour on another, then an hour on the other. And then the next day, do the same. We learn more effectively when we break it up like that, but we need periods of about an hour. Focus builds momentum. You're not up to your thinking best in 5 minutes, in 20 minutes. It can take much, much longer. So let's use that thinking momentum. So the ability to focus is number 2. Number 3, ultra learners learn directly. This means that they are quick to actually practice the skills they're learning. So whilst the rest of us don't want to look silly in public, and perhaps if we're learning a language, we might spend a lot of time on an app, having fun on an app. Ultra learners might use an app, but they're very quickly, within the first day, actually finding native speakers and speaking to them. They're speaking to people before they have competence. So as I say, this ultra learning, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's a very intense way, but it's the most effective way of learning. You're jumping in to the deep end, practicing, learning through doing, rather than learning through reading, learning through studying. If you're writing code, for example, you are writing code and sharing it with others. If you're learning how to take photos, well, yes, you're taking photos, but you're sharing them with others. You're getting that feedback. You're participating. You're setting yourself high goals. So we need to be very, very active in the learning. What is next? Ultra learners are willing to focus and drill down on what they are not good at. Now, most of us, when we practice, well, we quite like the experience of being competent, don't we? As a rule, I imagine most of you like feeling competent in life. And when we practice, unfortunately, what we might sometimes practice is what we're already good at. what we can already do well. Ultra learners are skilled at identifying what is the one thing that if they could get better at would make the biggest difference. They don't try to master everything. They're very selective in what they're going to learn. In any field, there are things you could learn which are nice to haves, but not really necessary. Ultra learners are willing to identify what they're not good at, and they're willing to suck. They're willing to practice it and do badly, maybe in public. They're willing to try again, again, again. Now, on Monday evenings, some of you know I do lectures. I actually lecture in coaching at a institute in Sydney, ACAP, and the people that I train to coach, they have practice sessions. And I've noticed again and again, people will practice in these sessions. If they get their own way, they'll try to practice what they're already good at. Now, this is natural. This is human nature. We want to demonstrate to others that we're competent, that we know what we're doing. Ultra learners don't have that need. They are willing, as I said, to suck. They're willing to look bad in the service of getting better. So this is a key principle of ultra learning. Willing to practice what you're not yet good at. Next idea is retrieval. Really interesting idea. Now, when you're learning something, I expect you get out a book, sit there and read it, and you study it, and you want to you review it, and then you might think, okay, what have I learnt it? Have I learnt it? Try and remember, and then you'll go and have a look. You'll have a look to see if you got it right. Turns out that's not a very good way of learning at all. There is a value in learning of suffering. Hear me out. Hear me out. Suffering in trying to remember. So the way we really embed knowledge isn't just by reading it and then parroting it back. It's by studying information, closing the book, putting it down, and then trying to recall as much as we can. Maybe there's 7 principles of that, or the 9 ideas of the other, but we try to recall what we've just learned. Now, people who are not ultra learners, like most of us, when we get stuck, we pick up a book and we have a look. No, do not do that, Scott says. What you need to do is struggle. You've got to struggle. You've got to get to that point where you say, yeah, it's A, B, C, and there's another one. There's a 4th one, and it's... I'm almost there. Hang on. They stay. Ultra learners stay in that zone of struggle, struggle, struggle. They reach back in their minds, and they grope around. It's an example of groping being okay. They grope at the back of their mind to try to, what was that again? Now, sometimes they'll reach it. They'll find what they were looking for, pull it forward. And it's the act of the grope and the pull forward that creates the neural pathways that help us to remember. It's the reach and the extraction. Great. But here's the weird thing. Let's say you try to remember and you don't remember what it was. You're struggling, you're anguishing, you're suffering, beads of sweat. What was that? You don't remember. Oh, and you say, okay, finally you give up. Amazingly, the effort that you just put in prepares the mind to embed new information. Then you look it up in the book after struggling. You say, well, oh, of course, I knew that. That information is now planted because of all that work you did digging around at the back of your mind. That new information gets a nice bed to be planted into. So, hard effort trying to remember. It's worthwhile whether you remember or whether you don't. So with that. What is next? I ought to remember, shouldn't I? Well, I do remember. It's feedback. Feedback. Ultra learners are willing to get feedback. More than that, not just willing, they need to get it, and immediate feedback. Now, there are some things you can do in which you can tell if you're getting immediate feedback. So if you're in a room, for example, and you're giving a talk, and you're actually in the same room, you can see how people are responding as you're speaking. If you're riding a bike or learning to snowboard or ski, you get immediate feedback. That's good, very good. We need that. Sometimes the things we're doing, we can't get so much immediate feedback, and we need a third party. We need someone else, and it could be a coach, a mentor, a trainer, someone who can observe what we're doing and give us the feedback. Ultra learners are very willing to get feedback, and they don't take it personally. They know that they're getting feedback on what they've done, not on their ego. They're not being evaluated for their worth as a human being. It's the actions of what they've just done. They get feedback on those. Now, the author Dan Pink, I'm sure a number of you remember Dan Pink. He wrote Drive, didn't he? And To Sell is Human. What else? He's written a number of things. Dan, he has a sort of, he calls it a pink cast. It's a video that's sent out probably once every 2 weeks. He had a lovely pink cast. They're, I think, about 60 seconds long, bite-sized. He had a lovely one recently, and it was about feedback. And in it, Dan says, here's how to ask for feedback. He says, don't ever ask for feedback. He says, instead, ask for advice. When you ask for feedback, you're asking someone potentially to be a critic. Nobody wants to be a critic. When you ask someone for advice, they'll feel flattered, and they will give actionable feedback. And that's what we need. Feedback that we can do something with. It's not helpful just to be told, yeah, that was good. Yeah, you're great. You're awesome. You're wonderful. Or you're awful. Neither of those are any good. What we need is feedback about the activity and what could be done even better. Feedback. Ultra learners are willing to get it and ask for it. They're always asking, what could I have done better? And Scott makes the point that the more feedback you'll get, the less personally you'll take it. It will be water off a duck's back after a while. So we ask for feedback. Pushing on, what's next? Retention. How are we going to keep this information that we've just learned? How are we going to get it, lock it in? It's a curious thing, but it turns out if you learn something really, really well, okay, you can repeat it back verbatim, you've got it. The human mind, according to some tests, forgets 50% of what it's just learned within an hour. 50 makes you cry, doesn't it? You've worked hard, you've studied it, you've memorized it, you've got it, you can draw the diagram, you've got the picture, you've got it, yes. And even then, within an hour, half of it has gone. And within a day, some studies show 70% it's gone. So information goes quickly, and then it hangs around for longer. It's almost like your memory is like a bucket, but it has more holes at the top of the bucket, not so much as the bottom. So what you've recently added to your bucket is more likely to go. There's a few things we can do, but the most important one we can do to embed, to retain information, is something called spaced repetition. We've got to recall it again. Earlier on we talked about recalling while we're learning, reading a chapter, trying to remember what have I just covered, what have I just learned, testing yourself. Ultra learners, they do that on the first day, then the second day they do it again. Without looking it up first, just to refresh their memories. No, they try to recall. And what did I cover yesterday? They draw diagrams, write lists, they recall as much as they can, and they allow themselves to suffer as they do it before looking it up. So you need to look a day later, maybe a week later, and then maybe a month later. Spaced repetition is what's going to lock in information for the longer haul. And next, depth. Ultra learners don't just learn things at a surface level, they learn them at depth. One of the best ways we can get a really nuanced set of understanding about any topic is to teach it to others, to develop the language and to articulate to others. How would you clarify this idea, this concept, this approach? How would you describe that to somebody else? And then do it. You just think about it. Or what? Yeah, how would I do it? You actually do it. I've been teaching coaching skills for 6 years now. No, 7 years. Teaching leaders how to have coaching conversations. And I thought I had it down pat to begin with. Oh yeah, I'm a coach, I know my topic. No, I did not. The experience of having to describe, articulate, explain, reframe, use metaphors or diagrams over time repeatedly has made me far more competent in my field. People who teach are often those who have the deepest appreciation. So if you want to deepen your knowledge of any topic, try teaching it to someone else. Finally, love the idea. This is ultra learners are willing to experiment. Now, did you know? I bet some of you do. So let me know in the chat if you did know. But Vincent van Gogh didn't pick up a brush and start painting until he was 26. Before then, he'd been an art dealer, so he'd seen a lot of art, and he'd tried being a minister. He'd failed at both. Couldn't sell art, and also sucked at being a minister. And then he decided at 26, you know what, I'm going to learn how to paint. And a family friend, mark you, said, you'll be awful. You don't bother. You're going to suck at that just like you failed at everything else. And here's the thing. The friend, to an extent, was absolutely right. When Vincent van Gogh started painting, he was a shocker. Just dreadful. Everyone said so. And the people he studied with saw his work, and it was awful. But he didn't stop. How dare he? He kept practicing. He practiced with chalk. He practiced with crayon. He practiced with charcoal. And he practiced with pastel colours and with inks. He practiced with muted colours, with greys, dark colours. And then he found his stride with vibrant, contrasting colours. He practiced with short strokes, big strokes. He was a very intense practicer. He might paint something, an entire painting, in a single day. So, started from being dreadful, but he experimented relentlessly because he had a compelling why. He was interested, deeply, deeply interested. That's Vincent van Gogh. The comedian, I've forgotten his name. I'm going to give you a comedian's name. Steve Martin. That's who it was. It was Steve Martin. Do you like Steve Martin? Very funny guy. He admits when he began, he was not funny at all. He says, I had no talent. But he did have an extreme interest. And he practiced and he practiced. That's what we need. So if you'd like to get good at something, at anything, take comfort from the ultra learners. You do not need to have any natural talent. None. But you do need a compelling why. You better be really, really interested. Okay, we have whipped through. See, our time is up already. How can time pass so quickly? 30 minutes is up. Here's the summary. Which one of these do you think might make the biggest difference to your learning? Is it getting better at focus? Tell me in the chat. Is it focus? Is it more active practice of the thing in the environment? Is it drilling down, identifying the one thing that's going to make the biggest difference? Is it practicing that idea of retrieval? Is it seeking feedback, being willing to get feedback, that actionable feedback? Is it revisiting information and locking it in with retention? Is it depth? Are you going to find people to teach? Whoops, let's put that back. Or is it experimentation? Are you going to be like Vincent van Gogh? Practice, practice, practice relentlessly. Let me know. Rashan, retrieval by far. I see it. Me too. It's very tempting not to do it, but it's going to help if we do that. Michelle, yeah, we need to get feedback rather than feedback and advice. Yeah, we need advice, actionable stuff. What else? People, what are you going to do? What will make the biggest difference to you? Tell me in the chat box. Our time is up here. We need to come to the end of this recording. To those who are watching, I invite you to commit, make a decision. Which one of those things are you going to work on first? Thanks for watching.